Hello, and welcome to the Hibernation podcast. My name is Dahyo, and I'm inviting you to join me for a weekly conversation with some of the amazing artists who've decided to stream with us over the course of the festival. Before we start the show today, we'd like to acknowledge and pay our respects to the custodians of the land upon which we stand. Wherever we are in this country, Indigenous sovereignty has never been ceded, and we must be mindful that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. As we share and explore music throughout the festival, we are also on a site that carries the reverberations of many centuries of music and cultural making. Joining us this week is Maddy Briggs. Maddy is an emerging composer based in Sydney. Her pieces often create a soundscape with real source sounds perverted by electronic means in order to create a unique and intriguing listening experience. Her interest lies in translating ideas across different artistic mediums, as well as using composition as a device to navigate ideas of complex emotion or social unrest. Currently studying composition in English at the University of Sydney and the Sydney Conservatorium of Music, she became a member of the Composer Collective Concert Project in 2020. She has also been commissioned by Vivid Sydney in 2019 and was featured in the 2018 Extended Play Festival. How are you, Maddy?
Hey, I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, not bad. Thank you for coming on.
No worries. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's good to have you. So as someone who is both studying sort of, I guess, art in terms of composition, music, and I guess also the sort of literature side of things, the English side of things, would you say that there is the two sort of ideas shape each other or sort of influence each other in your head?
Between English and music?
Yeah.
I think it makes me a lot more open to thinking how each can use each other, if that makes sense. How to do cross-medium things, I think.
Yeah, right. So would you say that you're interested in sort of literature and text in terms of compositions and that sort of stuff?
Yeah. I really like using distorted vocals, reading poetry, or just using like a text to inspire a piece.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Okay, so you say distorted vocals. So you've talked about, I mean, you know, from your biography and from the pieces of yours that I've listened to, you do seem to be very interested in electronic music and sort of mucking around with sound files in that way, like, you know, with computers and all that sort of stuff. How did that start for you?
I think I got really interested in high school. I listened to a lot of like long form kind of electronic music, or just like music with a whole lot of weird sounds in it that you can't make acoustically. Also, like in year 12, my music teacher introduced me to prepared piano, which was my first kind of foray into making weird noise.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I kind of, in university, when I finally got space to be able to learn about using a DAW and all the different techniques and like plugins you can use to ruin or like warp a sound, that really opened a door for me.
Opened a door.
So interesting.
Sorry. I can't resist a dad joke. Yeah, I think. Do you find that it feels like a different experience composing with the sound file directly rather than sort of writing out a score and then having someone play it? Do you find that that's a sort of psychological difference for you?
Oh, absolutely. I think when I write music, it tends to be a lot more planned for acoustic instruments. Like I'll think about how it will come from, like start at one point and go to another point and like bridging gaps. I think in a DAW, like using a sound file, you can do anything, and half the like random process of making music in that is part of the beauty of a piece. You know, you can just experiment and be like, oh, that sounds cool. Maybe I'll keep going in this direction.
Yeah. So it's a little bit more freeform for you, I guess, when you're sort of playing around with electronics and stuff.
Yeah, it's a lot more chance-based, like what happens in the moment, and that piece is a product of what I'm doing right then on that day, rather than like writing a couple of bars and coming back and being like, okay, cool, how can I develop that in a couple days?
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's interesting you talk about how you got into the avant-garde experimental type stuff in high school, because I think partly because I'm a composer, I think just it's ended up that most of the podcast guests have been composers. And it seems like there's a common thread of most of us have gone to the university going, I want to write, I want to be the next Hans Zimmer or something, that sort of joke. And then we get introduced to this stuff. But you sort of came in beforehand with this idea of sort of doing strange things, I guess.
Yeah, I was so lucky with my music teacher. He's Adrian Lim Clumps, his name is. He's in a Sydney band called Tangents, who are just phenomenal. That's the pinnacle of Sydney's art music scene. The stuff they do is incredible. He was in a band before that too called Trios, which did some really interesting stuff too. Yeah, so he was into prepared piano and stuff, and showed our class one day. And yeah, that was the first time I'd ever seen music made like that. I had no idea that you could do that. You could make sounds like that from an instrument. It's like such a clear mellow tone. It's like it plays all the beautiful romantic music, and here it is like screaming because you've put chains on the bottom end.
Yeah, but that's awesome though.
Yeah, it's so cool.
Have you done much prepared stuff yourself?
Not recently because I don't have a piano, but after that, I think mid-year 12, I got a free upright from Facebook Marketplace and
Really?
gave that a go. Yeah, I used to love that. I was there like every afternoon with my little bag of bottle caps and pegs and chains and a tambourine, just like doing whatever I could.
I guess the nice thing about doing prepared piano stuff is you don't really want an expensive piano to do prepared piano stuff on. So like you can just get a free crappy upright and just mess it up.
Yeah, exactly. The tuning doesn't matter.
So I got to admit, I don't have the most experience with prepared piano. I've never written for it. I've listened to a few pieces, but mostly they've been like the John Cage pieces, which are in my, like the ones that I've listened to at least have been a bit more sort of ambient and a little bit more sort of sedate. But you talked about putting chains on and making it sort of screaming and all this sort of stuff. Do you find did you find, I guess, that with your experiments you were more interested in like aggressive type stuff?
I think yeah, that's like one of the fundamental things of the prepared piano, I think, is what preparations do to the sound is they either emphasize the attack or like cut off the sustain. You can't really make anything long and pretty without digital manipulation. So prepared piano is more geared towards aggressive sounds. So noise is like weird kind of like metallic or like percussive noises are the focus of that.
Right. Okay. And when you were doing your experiments and all this sort of stuff with your free Facebook Marketplace upright, did you end up sort of creating anything? Do you have a piece that you ended up writing for it, or did it sort of not go anywhere after that?
I wrote pieces for the HSE, but I think they're just I don't have recordings anymore. That was so long ago.
I mean, who actually likes the HSC competitions as well?
Yeah. It's when you don't know that much, but after that I moved out, so I didn't get access to that piano. So I haven't been able to. I think my first semester of uni was for prepared piano, but after that I kind of drifted away into electronic stuff.
Yeah, well, that's a good place to drift to. I mean, I'm biased. Do you like writing for like acoustic instruments and electronic stuff, or is it more like pure electronic stuff?
I think it's electroacoustic. I like taking a sample from an instrument, like just a piano chord or something, and seeing how far you can take it from its original kind of sound.
Yeah, right. Okay. And just before the podcast, we were talking, just before we started recording, we were talking about how Logic is your DAW of choice, I guess. Any reasons why you went with that?
I got it for free from my sister.
Okay, well, that's a good start.
Yeah. Yeah, I think my dad had it in high school, so it was kind of my first introduction into how to make music digitally, besides maybe GarageBand.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I shit talk Logic all the time for no reason. I just like winding people up, I think. But I think Logic I don't have heaps of experience with it, but for me, it seems like it is really well designed in that it is sort of similar to GarageBand, but obviously a lot more capable. So people who sort of played around with GarageBand as a kid then can move to Logic and be sort of comfortable with it. Do you feel like that was the case for you?
Yeah, definitely. I think all the compositions I wrote for music in year 9 and 10 were in GarageBand, so you kind of get an idea of how to transition a little bit from that DAW to a more complex, scarier one.
Yeah, scarier, but I mean, a DAW is a DAW, right? Like the more you spend time in it, the more comfortable you get.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so take me through sort of what your current artistic practice looks like and sort of what currently musical or artistic ideas you're interested in, I guess.
Lately, what I've been doing is I have a whole lot of samples from piano that are kind of like bad quality recordings because they're recorded through a phone, and I've been playing kind of with ambient lo-fi glitchy kind of sounds. So with the prepared piano thing where the attack is the main part of the sound, I guess I kind of looked at that practice and was like, how can you use a DAW to fix the issues with the piano? So you can like with the sound file you can remove the attack and you can like artificially create sustain. So I think that's kind of been the basis of my pieces as of late.
Yeah, okay. Do you like in terms of how you actually go about that, is it the sort of case of loading samples into Logic and then sort of mucking around with them directly, like sort of like chopping off the attack at the start and doing all that sort of stuff?
Yeah. And also I've been comparing the same chord between two separate instruments to see like the differences in tuning and how the chords resonate in the actual bodies of the pianos and stuff. I started that off, I think, really preliminary in 2019, but then lately I've just been so interested in it, how two chords put next to each other, if they're the same chord, and like the attack is removed, have been given the same kind of digital treatment, and how they sound in comparison to each other. Like that, there's still such a big difference.
Yeah, that's interesting. Where do you think the differences come from? Like what are they? The differences.
The differences. Sometimes you can
sort of
hear.
Hard to quantify.
There are a couple. I guess like how they're recorded is a big difference. How far the recording device is situated to the instrument itself. The body of the piano too creates different harmonics to ring out in different instruments and start it and end at different times. So the chords evolve really differently too.
Okay. So I take it you sort of stretch the sample, you slow it down.
No, I've gotten the performers to play a chord really hard and just record the whole decay until you can't hear it anymore. So normally it's like one chord is like a 5-second clip or something.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Sounds like a lot of work though. Like it feels like you would have to be quite intricate with your automation and all that sort of stuff when you're actually sort of crafting that piece.
Yeah, and I think something I've started doing lately too is making that process kind of random rather than sitting down and listening to the product and like making conscious decisions. Sometimes I'll just like cut up all these samples randomly and then place them together without hearing it and then listen back to it and be like, oh, okay, cool. I guess that's what I'm using.
That's interesting. I'd never thought about doing that sort of thing with sort of soundscape design, but I feel like that's interesting because like it would sort of stop you from getting like, what's the word, like too invested in just tiny little bits, and it gives you the view of the big picture.
Yeah, and it kind of throws you off your normal compositional rhythm as well.
Right.
So you're creating something that you never would have created otherwise by like just through your own ears, and then you can figure out how that fits in to a more controlled place in the piece.
Yeah, right. No, that's interesting. Yeah, so I've heard a few of your pieces like in the past, and I've always enjoyed them. I think
Thank you.
One that has stood out to me was Purple Prose. I remember you did that on Soup with the radio show with Charlie and myself. You played that. Do you want to talk about just like what your idea for that piece was and sort of what the process was? Because I think that would be informative.
Yeah, sure. So I think I wrote a piece for uni a while ago where I recorded myself playing clarinet, and I found out that like pitch shifting a clarinet makes it sound insane. It was so cool. It sounded like little Pokemon. It was so much fun. And so I wanted to build a piece around that kind of sound, because you could get them to sound like they were talking, which is not something you can do, I think. I mean, you can do it if you're a great clarinet player, but like taking it, I think that's an interesting thing, is just taking an instrument and treating it digitally so it's just outside the bounds of what that instrument can do normally.
Yeah, so you pitch shifted it up, I'm assuming, considering you said little Pokemon.
I varied it, so I'd have like it playing a random thing, and I'd just like pitch shift it up and down in like random increments as like the phrase went on. So it wasn't just like I set the dial to like +2 semitones. I
changed the automation and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, and was Purple Prose, was that the one that you streamed with KP?
Yeah. I also ended up using a guitar on it with all the different distortion and like pedals. Yeah,
that's right. And you did that last year, correct, in lockdown?
Yes, I think. Yeah. It was Concept Project's little response to lockdown.
Yeah, I remember that. I really liked that whole festival. I think they did a really good job. So how was the experience of sort of streaming Purple Prose and all of that?
I learned a lot from it. I think that was my first kind of foray into using guitar pedals, because my main instrument is piano and keyboard, so it's kind of all the settings are kind of inbuilt there. But I really loved using analog gear and getting fine control over the sound, because I think also it's different with guitar when all the pedals are laid down on a pedal board on the ground. You know, you set it up before a gig and then you trigger the pedal and turn it off. But when you have someone being able to manipulate that live, the sounds change heaps.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
I feel like pedals are dangerous because...
Oh my God. After that, I bought my first one.
Yeah, spend heaps of money on bloody pedals.
They're so cool.
Yeah. Have you done much with the one that you bought since?
No, I haven't gotten a second lead to plug it in, but I'm so excited. It's called Mini Glitch. It's based on a Johnny Greenwood Max Patch, which
cool.
Creates stuttering noises. It's so sick.
I didn't know they made pedals based on Max Patches.
Yeah, neither did I. It was so cool to see.
Yeah. Okay. So how did you find like using pedals and the guitar with what you had already done with the clarinet, and then you added the guitar later on for the KP stuff?
Yeah.
Do you find that changed the piece a bunch?
Yeah, it did. I think I started off with that idea of, it was going to take place in St. Stephen's Church in Macquarie Street, which is such an incredible like place to hold it. They've been so instrumental in helping out, emerging musos. They've worked with Concert Project a lot.
That's where the Vivid gigs were a few years ago, correct?
Yeah. I thought it'd be really cool to have an electric guitar play in a church. I thought that was kind of the idea that I started off that piece with. And then I had my little clarinet noises in my back pocket that I was like, maybe that'd be a cool combination, because with that, I also use the guitar slide on it. And that makes really vocal noises as well.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was quite, from memory, it was quite an aggressive sort of noisy piece.
Yeah, the end just spirals and explodes. It was so much fun.
It is fun doing noise performance, isn't it?
Yeah, I remember talking to you before, and you're like, there's something so primal in just making noise. And you're so right. It just feels like it comes from such a like deep place.
Yeah, absolutely. It was... I mean, to plug this very podcast, I had a good discussion with Sebastian Skoy-Grayson a couple of weeks ago about that, and this sort of idea of non-representational gestures, and this very like, there's essentially what we were saying is there's this experience that comes with this sort of very raw aggressive sort of improvisational stuff. This experience, it's like really hard to put into words, and it's hard to sort of understand what that feels like unless you're actually in the place when it's happening. Do you feel like with noise and sort of experimenting with this noisy aesthetic, do you feel like it was designed for some sort of live performance rather than pre-recorded?
Absolutely, yeah. I think most live performances of like experimental and avant-garde are, I guess, that they become like having that recording was pretty cool. But every piece like that, I think, is there's this artist called Robert Rauschenberg who does really cool stuff. He collaborated with John Cage Heaps, and he has this series of paintings called white paintings, and they're just a canvas painted white, but he calls them clocks because he's like what they're used for is by looking at that painting, the way you experience it is so specific to that day, and it's like from that painting you can read, when you're standing there, you can read how many other people are in the room, or the weather outside, or what time of day it is on the paintings. And I think like a noise piece like the end of Purple Prose is very similar to that. I think it's like all the choices are made in response to the other person in that moment, based on the setting, based on how many people are there and who's responding to the music.
Yeah, so it's very much like it would vary depending on audience and audience reaction and sort of who is listening and what they think about it, I guess. Yeah,
and whether you had a good sleep the night before, anything.
Yeah.
It's completely a product of that moment in time.
Which sort of makes it exciting, like more exciting to see that sort of stuff, because it's like, it's going to be different every time, so you're not sure what you're going to expect.
Exactly. Every piece is living and breathing.
Yeah. Speaking of audience reaction, how was the audience reaction, did you find?
The video went live on Facebook, I think a couple weeks later, and the posts were promoted, so they had quite a big audience reach, I think. I did get a couple of comments that were not very impressed by the piece. I think one said that a 2-year-old could have made the piece, which is actually a really interesting response. I thought it was very funny.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, maybe that's part of working with experimental stuff, is sometimes people, I don't want to be that dickhead as like, no one can understand my music, but maybe some people like don't have the sort of prior they don't have the open mind to sort of explore this stuff, and they sort of come in with preconceived. Also, I'm assuming this was the dude who commented that. Yeah. So old man. So do you feel like that sort of that sort of boys club stuff comes into it as well?
I think so. I think it's a lot. I think it was really cool also being a woman and being given a space where I could just make noise and just go crazy and do whatever I want. But I think, anything like that, it's a reaction like that wasn't really unexpected.
Maybe it's a thing that like people don't want women to be loud, or
or they see something like that noise section and they're like, I don't see the merit in it, when like women a lot of the time I think have to justify the space that they take up in music by being like, this is the products I'm making, it is good, when I think a lot of the time men are received a lot less critically. Like their work, when it's presented, you don't have to, that people aren't automatically thinking, why has it been given the status it's been given?
Yeah, no, that's true. And sadly, I think that's even true like within these sort of communities, because like I was talking about, people who haven't engaged with this sort of music before and all of that stuff. But I think even sometimes people within a noise, or noise as an example because we're talking about it, but within any community, like maybe if a woman starts doing similar stuff. They're like, oh, she's not doing anything interesting, or maybe like, you know, so yeah, it's like, I think maybe, do you think it's something to do with like, not to call your piece ugly, but I think noise often is ugly, like objectively ugly, which is, as a side note, something that I'm actually kind of drawn to as ugly things. But do you think maybe people expect like women composers to only write sort of pretty music and that sort of stuff? Do you think that might be part of it?
Yeah, definitely. I think my roommate saw, I think, an article or something that called the music a man made, like, unabashedly pretty or something like that, which is like it was a statement writing pretty music from a man's point of view. But I think, yeah, no, definitely writing ugly music as a woman is perceived, it might be perceived as bad art because it's not
comes from these sort of misogynistic tropes.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, you go.
In 2019 when I wrote a piece for concert projects for Vivid, that was a lot of the work I was looking at was Margret Atwood was writing poetry, which is like poetry has a long history and, you know, being used like in it's super romantic, it's flowery, it's beautiful, it's got vivid imagery, and here's Margret Atwood writing ugly words in her poetry and getting direct and aggressive at people. One of my favorite lines in her poetry is "This is not a torch song, touch me and you'll burn," which is just like so fueled with anger. It's just so incredible. She's taking this like flowery medium to express feminine rage.
Which is so awesome. Amazing. I mean, I guess you could say Sylvia Plath has
absolutely
written similar stuff, you know, because it was, I guess that was the time. Let's go back to sort of ugliness though, in terms of art, because I think, like, you know, like way back as a kid when I was playing piano, I was playing Chopin and stuff, and I would always want to play all the really sort of beautiful pieces. Mm-hmm. But as time has gone by, I've found myself strangely drawn to ugly things. Do you feel the same way?
Absolutely. Yeah, growing up like playing Chopin, Beethoven, all that kind of stuff. And oh my god, I think I remember almost the exact moment, again, was with my music teacher. I was in a little contemporary group in high school and we played this one song, and then my music teacher was like, oh, for this section you should just slam the whole bottom of the keyboard, like just any notes, just like slam your whole arm across it. I was like, you can do that?
Yeah.
It's like, it was just noise because the piece got really intense and like fun. It was like, that is just noise you can make. I was blown away by that.
Yeah. What do you think it is that sort of is endearing about ugliness?
I think the way it can be used is so powerful. We had a little discussion about that before, which is like, sometimes a negative reaction to art is even more visceral than a positive reaction. You can hear a beautiful piece and be like, oh, that's beautiful, and then leave, you know, and get on with your life. But sometimes when you hear a piece that's just so like annoying, or just like you're shocked by it, or you're disgusted by it, you know, that emotion, like art being able to elicit that kind of emotion in you is almost stronger than thinking it's beautiful. And it's such a beautiful thing.
Yeah, true. I think also a lot of these like strong negative reactions that you can have to things is, I mean, that's interesting because it's sort of one thing that I have thought about a fair bit. I haven't really looked into it too much, but I've thought about is like, sometimes when things do create this strong visceral reaction, it's actually like a physical reaction.
Definitely, you feel it.
Like, you know, if you have a if you have a pretty piece of music, like you could be really emotionally invested, but for some reason, like, tell me if you disagree with me, but for some reason, for me, this stuff is like, if it's really if it's sort of loud and noisy and aggressive, maybe you get this feeling like in your stomach, for example, or I mean, if it's super loud, you can feel the vibrations and all that sort of stuff. Do you find that to be something that you look for in your music, or not really?
Yeah, I think I use that kind of stuff to. I don't know. It's just anything that's interesting like that, I think, is my primary concern with writing pieces. You know, if it's interesting to me, I'll use it rather than just like, is it pretty? Is it feeling happy? Is it feeling like scary? Like, is this like an interesting thing that's happening? You know,
Yeah.
and I think noise definitely does that. It's such a powerful vehicle in a piece. I think too, it makes, you know, softer, more like beautiful parts of music heightened. If you're showing them like these ugly, like noisy parts of your pieces, and then you have like softer moments, that it's just like, yeah, heightened.
Yeah. That's interesting that you talk about having that contrast within the one piece, because a lot of noise gigs that I've been to, people have, I won't name any names, but I've found some of the less engaging noise acts that I have seen have been like, it's just like, there's no direction to it. It's just been sort of used kind of tastelessly. It's like,
Yeah.
I can be loud because I want to be loud, that sort of stuff, you know? Whereas I feel like for you and what you're saying is you use noise more as like as an accent.
Yeah, I think when you use noise, you need to be aware of where it sits in the context of your piece and what it does and what it's doing more broadly than that. Like it's a device. It's not for the sake of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you get interested in noise in the first place?
I can't even
High school
remember.
again?
Probably, yeah. Probably like the first noise stuff I can remember hearing, I think, was maybe, you know, Velvet Underground. That I think is it European Sun with that massive crazy solo in the middle.
I don't think I know that.
Yeah, he it's just like a part of the song where it's just noise pretty much, like erratic guitar playing. And I was like, whoa, like you can do this. You can record it, put it on a record, and sell it, and it's one of the most acclaimed albums of the 60s.
Right. So you sort of went through there and then sort of went down the rabbit hole a bit.
Yeah, I think too. I'm in a band, and a lot of this, when I've like started listening in depth to music, that the part that made a lot of contemporary tracks for me wasn't, you know, the melody or the harmony or lyrics or anything. It was like the little fleeting moments that would happen behind, you know, the vocals.
Yeah.
And I think learning how to Purple Prose with the noise section was kind of like a big experiment, and it was like a first leap into that kind of area. I think it's a really, I love doing it that way, because then you can figure out how to hone it down and use it for more specific things, or like you use it as like a learning experience, which you can then whittle down and use more purposefully. Now you know what to do.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely find that if you're trying to learn something, doing it within a project is useful.
Yeah.
Would you agree? It's
scary being like publicly being like, I'm just learning things, but it's I mean, that's what Hibernation is about, and it's one of the most incredible things I've seen. So
yeah, true. The aesthetic of the failure as an option sort of vibe that you...
Yeah, exactly. It gives you this space where you can try things out and fail. But if it works, you know, you found a new way of writing music. And you have some incredible pieces.
Yeah, exactly. And I think realistically, like, as a composer, I don't think everything I write, well, obviously not, because I've written a lot of crap pieces in the past, but like going forward, I think I'm probably going to write a lot more crap pieces, but I think sort of worrying about that too much will probably stop you from writing good pieces at the same time.
Exactly. And I think sometimes you have to write, like, being able to be aware that those pieces are bad means you've already learnt heaps from like from the point of you writing them to where you are now. You've learned enough, so you know that piece wasn't the best. It could have been done things differently.
Yeah, and I think sometimes also like when things I heard someone talking about experimental music one time at a gig. I just overheard them, and they said, "Oh yes, I'm interested in experimental music. There's a lot of bad ones that come out, but that's why it's experimental, because you're trying things out, and it's not always going to work. You know, whereas if you write a 2-5-1 with no parallel fifths, like you sort of know how it's going to sound, and it's going to sound good every time. But it's like, I guess with experimenting and with avant-garde and this sort of chasing the new and that whole aesthetic, the risk that something will end up being bad is almost what makes the genre as a whole appealing.
Yeah, and I think putting those kind of good and bad product kind of judgments on avant-garde is almost misplaced, because it's kind of a better marker of its success is, what is the concept? Is it a good concept? Was it executed true to that concept? Rather than how does the end result look?
Yeah, true. So now that you've said that, do you feel like you approach writing music conceptually first?
Yeah, I think a lot of the time I'll do that. Lately, I've been veering away from that a little bit, which I think is a good thing. Being able just to sit down and do it all by kind of chance, or what happens in that door session is a way I'm really interested in writing, like right now. But yeah, definitely I'd always start off with a concept and was like, how can I execute this musically? How can I represent this to people?
What do you mean by concept in this case?
Just an idea, or like a theme, or
like sort of some like extra musical thing that you're trying to communicate.
Sometimes, yeah. I think Purple Prose too was like, look at this guitar make crunchy noises in a massive, beautiful church. You know, that was
so it was like the juxtaposition of the sort of, forgive me, like ugly music in a beautiful environment. Is that what
exactly?
You're sort of,
yeah, and you know, a place just entrenched in history of like beautiful choirs, you know, singing hymns, that kind of stuff, and bringing in this electric guitar just to scream. I thought was it was so cool to be able to do that.
Absolutely. Whereas I guess This Is Not a Torch song, coming from Margret Atwood and everything, was much more sort of explicitly, I guess, political and feminist.
Yeah.
You like I'm just assuming, but.
I started off with much more of an idea in mind to form the piece, rather than having there's a more rigid structure to that as well, I think, to convey the idea.
Just the piece in general, yeah. Do you find that you're more drawn to sort of, how would I define like the two different things, like the sort of more statement political, trying to, not necessarily political, but like trying to say something, that sort of piece, and then there's the exploring spaces and sort of musical concepts, and those, do you know the separation? Do you find that there's one of those two that you end up writing for more, or not really?
I think when I started, I used to do that kind of like trying to say something kind of idea behind my piece. I think it was a really good motivator, and there were a lot of things I was angry about, you know. And but I don't know, lately I've been less kind of, because I think I'm more interested in the material I'm using itself rather than what it says, or trying to fit it into a broader kind of message.
Yeah, I mean, this sort of idea of, I've shown people some of the noise experiments that I've done and all that sort of stuff, and people have always asked me, "Oh, what does this mean?" You know, that's always the first thing. It's like, what does this mean? And that can be really hard to answer.
Absolutely, especially when it's like a study in, like, yeah, one of those learning experience kind of pieces. You know, it's like a means to an end. The stuff, it doesn't always have to be like that, the pieces you write.
Yeah. And I think sometimes maybe we, like, just in general, we sort of make this mistake of trying to make fit meaning into something.
Yeah.
I mean, Damian Barbara wrote this really beautiful piece for violin and Ball of Wool.
I know that piece. It's
I
stunning.
adore that piece. It's just sublime. But Damian was talking about how he's had a lot of people come up and offer like what they thought it was about, and he's been like, well, it was about, you know, a violin and a ball of wool. It wasn't about anything else.
Yeah.
It's interesting how we sort of attach meaning to these things, isn't it?
Yeah, and I guess like that piece, the point of it is for you to experience it, you know, you to see this thing happen and have your reaction to it, which I guess includes people thinking about the meaning. But yeah, I think thinking that art has to have a message or try to convey something specific to an audience kind of devalues the art itself sometimes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I just find it interesting, sort of how people approach this stuff, you know, and how people tend to interpret this stuff when it's not something that's necessarily they necessarily used to interpreting, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, unfortunately, we are running out of time a little
no.
bit. It goes fast.
It goes so fast.
But I'd just like to talk about very briefly, without spoiling too much, your upcoming streams that you have. So we have your concert project stream, and we have the stuff
Christine
that you
Pan.
are. Yes, that's with Christine, and then we have the stuff that you're doing within the Minecraft project.
Yes, with my sister.
Yes. So do you want to talk us through those very briefly, as much as you are able to without spoiling things?
Sure. The concert project stream is it's part of a series. You might have seen Gabby and Sophie do the first stream.
I did. That was fantastic.
Yeah, it was brilliant. So they sent me a whole lot of little samples, and I put them in a DAW and just messed them up and had lots of fun, and sent it back to them as a backing track that they played over. And in their stream, they embedded a whole lot of hidden messages, apparently. And then me and Christine have weeded through that stream, and we're gonna use that as a backing track where we will like improvise over it, and you see if we translated the messages right. And I think this time we're doing a little bit of audience interaction too, to help form the improvs.
That's always really fun in live streams. I really like doing that.
Yeah. I have I'm going to be using my guitar for that. I've got some very weird things to use on it. Picked up a electric toothbrush without its head yesterday at work. Oh, cool. Much to the chagrin of my bosses. But yeah, I'm excited to see how that goes.
It's for a good cause, you know, it's for art.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that one, and then you've also got the Minecraft thing that you're doing with your sister. So without spoiling too much of that for the audience, do you want to give us a little taste of what that's about?
Oof.
Are you able to do that?
Yeah, I think so. My sister has built this. I helped a little bit, but it was mostly her. She's just like a Minecraft wizard. She built this massive concert hall where we'll put on a concert of sorts. That's as far as I'll
That's as
go.
far as you'll go. Well,
Yeah,
I
I'll
have
have to see it.
seen what the concert hall looks like, and it does look awesome. So anyone listening in, you should definitely buy a ticket to Sound Service so that you can experience it yourself, because it is looking really cool.
Yeah, what a cool form of art making using Minecraft.
That was a really cool idea of Damien's.
Incredible.
Well, it sort of reminded me of extended play a little bit, but online, and it's nice to have the impression of hanging out with someone in a space, you know. Yeah. All right, well, thank you for coming on. The other thing is we have an art in an hour as well.
We do. I'm very excited for that.
When's that? That's on September the 19th. I have no idea what I'm going to do, but I'm sure we'll figure something out.
Yeah.
Yeah, but thank you very much for thanks for coming on the podcast. It's always good to talk to you, and people at home, thank you for tuning in. Thanks for supporting live music in a interesting time for live music, especially experimental music. So thank you for continuing to listen and support us. And yeah, we'll catch you next week.